Craft Brews and Casual Conversations. We are essentially live in an actual brewery for the first time ever. Joined with me is Andrew, a brewmaster, a beer enthusiast, and just a great guy. This is Dudes with Brews on a Porch.
You're about to hear the greatest show of your life.
Dude.
Dudes with Brews on a porch with Rob and Drew.
Andrew, thanks for being on here.
Yeah, thanks for stopping on by. I'm always happy to have people in, try some of our beers, and give me such great praise as calling me just a great guy. There's a few that might argue about that one.
Hey, we all have, our haters and everything like that. So you're the brewmaster, head brewer of Fox River Brewing Company, Oshkosh, Wisconsin, Appleton, Wisconsin as well. So anytime somebody has a Fox River Brewing Company beer, that's you.
Yeah, I mean, I can't take credit for some of our mainstays. Some of those beers are almost as old as I am. We've been in operation in Oshkosh since 1995. Then we opened the Appleton facility in 97. I've been in charge here now for about 3 months, so the big ones you sell in the market, I'm just doing my job to keep them up to the standard of excellence we've always had and maybe improve them. And then we are just churning out the new beer as fast as humanly possible to try to catch back up to where the market is.
Yeah, so a couple things I want to touch on. Of course, we have an array of beer here that we're going to kind of dive into, talk about, the ABVs, IBUs, all that good stuff. And also kind of like what your favorites are, how you got into brewing. It's all starting. So let's start with the first beer here. What do we got?
So actually, I'm going to have you start on the other side of things.
Okay, the other side here.
Yep, that is the Blue Bobber. It's the beer that has kind of kept our lights on now for the last couple of years. It's the only reason we sell beer outside of our restaurants. It's a nice summery beer that you can drink all year round that is beer first and fruit second.
Okay. So yeah, you a lot of times with, an example would be like Leinenkugels. They have that Berry Weiss. A lot of people know that one, and it's when you say beer first, I feel like when you drink a Berry Weiss, it's not beer first, it's fruit first and then beer, because I'm not really a big fan of this. The Blue Bobber I love because, yeah, you get the beer taste, but you have the blueberry aspect with it.
That, and if you ever visit our facilities and order a Blue Bobber, we go the extra mile and we put the blueberries in the glass and let them bob up and down for you, which means we really strained ourselves and we thought of a name for it. But it's fun to watch and it's just delicious to drink during the middle of summer.
What do you do for the brewing process on this one? Like, you throw blueberries in the tanks with it? So
actually, Blue is, as a brewmaster who thinks he has a nice cultivated taste on beer and knows a thing or two, and I say thinks he knows that. Blue is one of my least favorites to drink of ours because it doesn't quite have the complexity that I look for as a beer nerd.
Okay.
However, it's super simple on the brew side, so it's my favorite beer to make.
Yeah.
This beer gets all of its flavor and all of its beauty after the beer has already been fermented and filtered. We add kind of a secret process of natural blueberry products, including natural blueberry juice, to give this just wonderful blueberry aroma that you can smell 3 miles away, and then the flavor to back it up.
Yeah, and when you say Blue Bobber, it's not a blue beer. It's a lighter beer. I know some people might be,
it's got this like tinge of blue or purple to it, but that's about it.
Yeah, I enjoy it, and I've had it a handful of times. I've also had the red. You guys did the Red Bobber for a little bit.
Yeah, the Red Bobber is our newest year-round beer. It came out last spring to kind of be a pair with the Blue. So it's still available year-round. We don't see quite as much of it moving out as Blue, but we never expect it to anyway.
Yeah, so going into, you said you've been kind of like the head of the show for 3 months now. It started with home brewing, just grabbing a kit and kind of learning that way?
Yeah, I got my start in the what we refer to it as the hobby. As if there is nothing else in your life, and there really is. There's two types of home brewers. There's the guy that makes a beer 2 or 3 times a year because it's fun, And then there's the guy whose life is all consumed by brewing, and he goes to work to pay for it.
Sure.
So I got my start back when I was actually only 20 years old, because it's perfectly legal to buy all the supplies.
Right.
In fact, the guys at the homebrew shops, they are happy to tell all you underage guys, which I'm not advocating you do, how to make beer and wine. So I went to the shop, got my supplies, brought it home, and made a batch of mead, which is actually a honey-based wine. I tried to do 3 1-gallon batches. Only one of those batches survived all the way to completion, and it still went down the drain because it was bad. Not unhealthy for you bad, but just bad.
Tastes bad.
Yeah.
Smelled bad.
It didn't smell bad, but it was pretty rough.
Well, when you're getting your start, I mean, that's kind of expected. You know, you're kind of just tinkering with it. You're learning things, and I mean, if you brew the perfect batch the first time, you better take that out on the road.
You say that, and I used to work for a homebrew shop doing classes on the weekends, and there were these 2 women that came in. They had driven like 2 hours across the state to get to our shop, and they wanted to brew their great-grandmother's brew recipe from like the Great Depression era and before. So they hand me this like sheet of paper that has a vague list of ingredients, half of which don't exist anymore. And we work with them as best as we can to recreate this, happy memory they have.
Right.
And they came back about a month later with the finished product, and we had a class going on that day that was a higher level one. So we had a couple other people try it, and I all just looked at them and went, "Why are you guys not doing more of this? This is your first batch, and it's delicious."
Really? So what, I guess, going into brewing a beer, there are the starter kits where you get like the syrups and stuff to go into your little mini tanks, or usually it's like a 5-gallon glass jug.
Yeah, these days you get the 6-gallon plastic food grade bucket to ferment in with those syrups. Modern kits are even better. They've got actual grain that comes with them as well to get better flavor. You've got nice fresh hops. They're basically these like all-in-one. It's almost like the modern meal kits you get these days. Where It's got the instructions. It's got everything you need minus the equipment. Walks you through every part of the process. And as long as you don't screw it up too bad, you get drinkable beer out the other side in about a month and a half.
What did you have to learn, like, starting this? So you're 20 years old. I'm sure you were interested in doing it. You made mead. You eventually moved to a beer and things like that. What did you have to look up? You said you worked at the shop, so did you learn a lot that way?
I had to learn the terminology was the weirdest part, because, I mean, as homebrewing has gotten more and more online, there's massive amounts of resources out there, but most of them assume you speak the language.
Right.
So when you run into these German words like lauter and Vorlauf, you have no idea what that means. And when you try to look up the definition, it goes, yeah, Vorlauf is Vorlauf. It assumes you know what it is.
The schnozberries taste like schnozberries.
Yeah. And the app I was using to like make beer recipes had 0 instructions. It already assumed you know how beer works.
Right.
You use me now to make more beer. So that is like the most daunting part for new people when they get in, is just learning that terminology, and then the belief that you need to be perfect right out the gate.
Right.
I always equate making beer to cooking. You don't have to be a master at it to get something that's worth your time. I mean, just the fact that you're the one that made it is already going to make it taste better than half the stuff on the shelf.
Right. And a lot of people probably don't even know what the science behind beer, how much like effort and actual work. They kind of the running joke is, oh, you want to be a brewer, you want to brew beer, well, get ready for 90% of your life to be cleaning.
Yeah. The way I usually explain it when I have people that are asking, oh, I want to be a brewer, what should I do? Or when I was doing tours was, I'm not actually a brewer. I don't make alcohol. I shine tanks and I babysit yeast. They do the work.
Yeah.
So like even brewing the most masterful batch of beer out the gate, where I've spent time and energy on researching the chemistry and sourcing my ingredients and all that, 90% of the work is still shining the tank and cleaning this and sanitizing that and babying the yeast and whispering sweet nothings into the tank and hoping it turns out right.
Were you kind of interested in science and stuff like that growing up, or?
To an extent, yes.
Okay.
One thing that I had heard early on when I was brewing and starting to actually kind of want to learn more about it and get better at it was that a lot of the guys who were really doing good beer were not that sciencey. They said that they didn't like science in high school or college, and it didn't really become anything of interest to them until they had something they could hold in their hand
Physical
to actually
product.
make it click.
Yeah.
And there is something to be said about that, because I've learned more chemistry and biology during brewing than I ever did in college. And it clicks better now that I can have something in front of me where I can see how it worked.
Yeah, I can definitely see that, and how like the physical result is, that's kind of is satisfying, and for the fact that like now you're at a point where you're making it for a lot of people to be consuming, and people enjoy it, people like it, so you're now bringing it to a larger scale, not only for yourself but for other people. So that's got to be pretty satisfying.
Yeah, that part is satisfying, and then on the chemistry and the science, it becomes more important on the commercial side than the home side, because it's not only can I make one batch of beer taste good, it's can I make that batch again tomorrow and it comes out the exact same way. That's actually, it is the name of the game in brewing when you're distributing outside of your own tap room. It's an issue that we see in a lot of guys that get bored in their job and hop into this industry with their retirement cashed out.
Sure.
Is they make a great batch of beer, but they don't understand how to make it that way again, and they run into these hurdles where they start having issues. It's actually part of why certain breweries have thrived so well. Is you've got breweries that their mission is basically to never brew the same beer twice, so they never have to learn those lessons.
Right.
We're not quite in that boat, unfortunately.
I see the appeal to that. You're never going to get the same thing twice, but on a scale too, when you're kind of trying to be commercially successful, trying to get people in the door and enjoy it more, like do the experimental stuff, but at the same time you got to have the staples. Like your Blue Bobber is a staple here, and so I see the importance of that. Do you? So now with like the recipes and everything like that, you started with like a 6-gallon bucket. What am I looking at right now?
So we brew a couple of different batch sizes here. The smallest batch we've ever done is a 7-barrel batch. So commercial brewing, our unit of measurement is the barrel. It equates to 31 gallons. So 7 barrels comes out to, I can't do math in my head.
7 times 31.
217 gallons. So that's kind of the minimum of what I can make. Things like Blue Bobber, though, we're utilizing what are referred to as double tanks. So my system is designed to brew 11 barrels at a time. We squeeze an extra barrel into that and brew 12.
Cool.
So I'll get about 24 barrels of Blue Bobber on a single batch for about 744 gallons going into that tank total. Wow. By the time everything's said and done, I'll end up with about 660 to 680 gallons of sellable product.
Crazy. Have you ever just drank it like straight out the barrel?
So that is the part of the job that everybody thinks is awesome is you get paid to go drink. I come in some mornings and we do readings on these tanks every day during fermentation. Mm-hmm. So you pull a sample out, you measure the amount of sugar that's left to track the fermentation, you'd get a sensory analysis of smell, and you take a taste. Unfortunately, day-old beer is really bad. 4-day-old beer isn't much better. It doesn't really become beer until it's into what we refer to as a bright tank, and it's carbonated and about 2 weeks old.
Okay.
So I get to try the stuff, but it's pretty harsh, especially right now we have a Imperial Stout in one of our tanks that we're calling the Pontificate Stout, which is my nerdy Futurama reference to Nibbler. Because he's got like the line in one of the movies, I think, where like, you can speak. He goes, not only can I speak, I can pontificate. And it's this big, bold, boozy stout. And it's just awful right now. Yeah. It's designed to be drank in like 6 months, and by then everything will mellow out and come together into this roasty, wonderful beer. But it's boozy and bitter right now.
So with the stouts, like a lot of times you hear these bourbon stouts and stuff like that. The longer they sit, the better they taste. Is the legend? Yeah,
the bigger alcohol beers are designed to be consumed older. Like a 9 to 10% stout shouldn't be drank before it's a year old.
Okay.
And then with the barrel aging, it's this wonderful process where you get the flavors of the bourbon and the oak to come into the beer, and you want to leave it in that barrel for about a year. But some of these beers are like 15% sometimes.
Yeah, it's
before
strong.
They go into the barrel, and then they pick up some booze in there, so you can pull it out of that barrel and let it age even longer. They're wonderful at like year 3 or 4.
I've had some like a bourbon barrel straight out of the barrel once, and it was pretty good, and it was I enjoyed it. But let's move on to this next one. What do we got here?
Okay. I gotta pause you for 1 second. I got an employee needing a paycheck.
Oh geez. All right, so we gotta do that. That's fine. All right, the man is paid.
Yep. Yeah, as much as brewing is a wonderful job, if the paycheck doesn't show up, they won't either.
Exactly. Yeah, that's with any place. But so what am I looking at here?
All right, so beer number 2 is the Metternich's Brau. It is a traditional Vienna-style lager, so it's only about 4.5%, but it's got this wonderful malty, toasty character to it. It's got a little bit of body. It's just a great fall lager.
Yeah. So when people say, the fall lager or something like that, what is the definition of the seasons? Like how do you determine what is it just by brewing, or is it like kind of, with what you're eating that time of year, how the weather is? How does that determined?
It can be a little bit of all of those. I'm not going to lie. We brewed this beer in the fall because I had leftover malt from brewing Oktoberfest that had to be burned up. But I also, like, when I looked at those malts and what could I do with it, well, it's getting colder out, something that's a little heavier, a little maltier. As it gets colder, you want something you can almost chew on a little bit, I guess. Yeah. And then, the foods we eat do change seasonally, so you want something that'll match that.
How important to you as a brewer is it to make sure, like, when you're going down to have a meal, do you determine your beer from what's in front of you on your plate, or do you go, I'm in the mood for an IPA with my whatever?
It's a little bit of that, a little bit of what's on draft where I'm at. I've got friends who have many angry stories about the what's on draft conversation with bartenders. Jeez. It was a specific visit to a Buffalo Wild Wings where it took us a half hour to get a beer. I claim it's not my fault. I could be very wrong on that. But for the most part, when I go to sit down and eat, I do try to match the beer and the food together. So there is times where I know I want a specific beer, so I'm going to order something that'll match that, or vice versa. And there are, some simple guidelines and rules to that. Spicy foods go really well with IPAs. The bitterness and the fruitiness complements that spice.
That makes sense.
Your heavier beers go well with some of the heavier dishes. Right. It's almost kind of like when you pair wine: red wines with heavy dishes, white wines with light dishes, light beer with light dishes, dark beer with dark or heavier dishes.
Are you a wine guy too?
I am a amateur wine enthusiast at best.
I don't like it.
I like fermentation is probably the best way to put it. And my girlfriend will attest to my love of it and her hatred of it somewhat. As our house smelled of sauerkraut this fall, and she was not a fan. But I do make wines at home as well. All right. My dad and I we grow a couple of different fruits out at his house. We harvest those every year and make wine. I've done hard ciders. I've done meads. I've done kombuchas. If it ferments, I'll try my hand at it. So
pretty much like the home stuff, you really get your opportunity to kind of experiment is kind of what it sounds like. You try new things. Do you ever just think of what's the wildest creation you've concocted?
There's a couple that fall under that avenue. I've got a homebrew batch I did about 2 years ago for the Fond du Lac Brew Fest that was a plantain Dunkelweizen. So Dunkelweizen is a German-style wheat beer. Mm-hmm. It's darker, but it's still brewed with the Hefeweizen strain, so you got this peppery or clovey banana flavor going on. And was watching, I think it was Chopped, actually. Okay. And they had plantains, and the judge is talking about, these are a very starchy thing, and yada yada. And my brain went, starch is fermentable. I brew with starch. I'm going to make a beer with that. There you go. And so I chopped up 6 green plantains and threw them in my mash tun, which is where we add the grain to convert it into sugar. And fermented that out. Didn't really add as much banana character as I was expecting, but it gave it this creaminess that was just awesome. Yeah. But beyond that, I used to work for a brewery in La Crosse, and we did a lot of cask conditioned beers there. And so what that is you take a fully finished beer, about 5 or 10 gallons of it, you put it in this stainless steel vessel, you seal it up with yeast and sugar and literally whatever else you want to put in there. It will carbonate itself, and then to tap it, you have to hit a spile into it and then a tap into it with a hammer. Okay. It is super fun to do. But it is even more fun to let people who have no idea what it is do it and watch them get sprayed with beer. But we did those for events because you're in the middle of a brew fest and you yell out, hey, who wants to come tap this keg? You get a specific type of person out of the audience
Sure.
to come and do it. They smack it in, beer goes flying everywhere.
It's awesome.
It's awesome. But for one of those, I took a Hefeweizen we had made, and I made it into a ceviche-themed beer. So it had the Hefeweizen, it had orange, it had lime, it had some spices, and then it had smoked mango that I made myself for it. So I went and got some frozen mango and threw it on this DIY smoker we had built out of air duct equipment to smoke malt the week before, which was its own wonderful story where it involved us filling a back area of a factory with smoke from feet level all the way up to the sky, and you couldn't see or breathe. But actually, the mango part was done while the owners were on vacation, so they got this picture of 3 brewers sitting around a fire at 11 o'clock on a Monday. I'm sure they loved that. But yeah, I had that smoked mango in there with all that other stuff, and it was just this like smoked Hispanic dish that you would have on the beach, but in a beer.
That's awesome.
It was really good, and about a 4-ounce pour. Any more than that would have been a little much.
Yeah, I've had a friend of mine made a jalapeno like strawberry beer before, and when it comes to like spiciness, I'm a huge baby. What you probably think is mild, I think is scorching. So I tried it, and I'll try anything once, but it was weird. It wasn't bad, but I was like, it kind of like kicked your throat a little bit afterwards.
Spice in a beer is a tough note to hit. The only time I've done spicy beers is, again, that cask program there. We had an IPA that we threw some serrano peppers in because in the brewing industry, one of our biggest waste products is spent grain. So once we're done converting the barley and wheat we use into usable sugar, we basically have to throw it away. And if we just throw it into a dumpster, we got to pay somebody for that. So most of us contract out with farmers. They come pick it up, take it and feed their cows, their chickens, their pigs. But one day the farmer showed up to pick up the grain. He just drops his paper bag on the brew desk. It's like, here, I brought you guys some treats. What are these? Serrano peppers. And all 3 of the brewers at that place, we were all spice heads.
Yeah.
So we immediately started slicing them up and eating them. I'm like, this would be really good in our IPA. And we threw it in there, and we went to tap it in the brewery. And all of us loved it. We're like, oh, this is the best. Everybody else is like, my throat is on fire. Why do you like this? Because I like my beer to be angry.
The drink is not supposed to hurt me.
But a really well-made spicy beer should have just a little hint of heat. It should build at each sip until you get to the end, and you should have just that nice lingering burn, which so few people hit that properly. And I'm not claiming I've ever done it.
I don't know that I would even want to attempt that because, like I said, spice is not my thing. Unless, I always joke the only thing I like spicy is my ladies, Hey-yo. So what am I looking at next?
So the next one is the Big Ed's Hop Yard. It's a beer we do every year in conjunction with Big Ed's Hop Yard, as the name implies. They are here in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. They grow a small lot of hops. We buy most of them. So this is a beer that we go out at 8 in the morning to their hop yard. We harvest with them. We bring the hops in, and they go right into our brew kettle by the next day. So most of the time when you're working with hops as a product, it's a highly processed product. It's harvested in the fall. They bring it into these massive warehouses, dry it out to preserve the oils that are within or that are inside of it, which is where we're going to get our flavor and our bitterness. They then crush them down and pelletize them, so you get this. It almost looks like what you use at a petting zoo to feed the animals.
Yeah, like goat food.
Yeah, and that ends up in our boil kettle. So this way, we're just literally picking them off the vine and almost tossing them in the kettle. This year's iteration is a red ale, so it's got a nice maltiness to it, and then there is just that little bit of hop character because wet hops you need to use like 4 times the normal amount to even get like any flavor at all.
Oh, really?
It's a very delicate flavor.
Yeah, it's when I was looking at it, it's kind of like definitely like a medium color. I was when I tasted it, I was surprised that it goes down very smoothly, a little lighter and everything like that.
Yeah,
so
it's this weird like thing in the brewing industry where people equate dark beer with this like heavy, just filling, bitter, all kinds of weird descriptors. And the one they always cite is, I don't like Guinness. That beer is heavy. And are you kidding me? Guinness you get on draft is like 4.2% ABV. It's lighter than most of your Miller and Bud Lights.
Right.
So one of the things I like to play around with is letting people know that beer color does not necessarily equate to flavor, so you got to ask them things like, well, what do you like for taste? Do you like coffee? Oh, I love coffee. Well, don't look at this, but just try it.
Yeah, have the
so like this red ale falls into that. It's dark. It's got this like ruby red tint, but it's only like 5%. It drinks pretty easy and light.
Yeah, it went down pretty smooth. It's I always refer to some of these as like game day beers. Like when you're watching the Packer game, you want something going down smooth. Unless like the Packers are doing really bad, then you want to
then you up your game a little bit.
Turn to other things.
Yeah, the technical term we use is sessionable.
Okay.
So it implies the technical definition of sessionable is 5% ABV or less, but the idea behind it is a beer that you can have 3 or 4 of in a sitting and still be having a functional conversation with the person drinking with you.
Okay.
And there is actually a big turn towards these beers in the craft world. I mean, when I was turning into a drinking age and learning how to brew, everybody was going for like 9% IPAs and 8%. Yeah. And as much as I love those beers, you have 2 of those and that's your night.
Right.
There is now this desire again to have the same effect you had drinking Miller Lite at the bar, but to have something that doesn't taste like water.
Right. And that's kind of like as I've gotten older, of course, when you're 21, you kind of look to party. And when you're younger, you kind of look.
Whatever's cheapest is best.
Right. And then I got into the craft brew stuff. And now, it's definitely like I like to be social. I don't like to have, and if I'm being social, I'm having a couple drinks, a couple beers. And I don't want to be tanked by, 9 o'clock at night. So yeah, I definitely I like that. I like that phraseology that you use for that kind of thing. So let's look at this next one here. This one looks great.
So this beer has been out for a grand total of 2 days. We released it yesterday. It is the Calamity IPA.
I love
so
those.
One of my missions as I've taken over here is to up our IPA game. Our hopping rates and things like that have been a little archaic. So this one is designed in that like crushable, sessionable realm. It's only like 5.2% ABV, but it's got this just massive hop aroma and a nice flavor, and then just no bitterness. So it's not that like normal IPA where it's just mouth puckeringly bitter. This is hoppy and happy.
So are you a big IPA fan?
I am a big IPA fan.
I love them.
They don't quite get along with me as much as I like them, but there is a running joke in our industry that there are the stages of craft brewer nerd. And there is, you start on stage 1, drinking light beer. Stage 2 is something equivalent but yellow. Wisconsin would be Spotted Cow.
Right. Dude, you're right on the head so far.
From there, your next stage of your beer evolution is IPA. Then you get into sour beer. Mm-hmm. And then you finish back at lager again where you started, but you're drinking better lager.
So when I started this podcast, the first episode we did was with Spotted Cow, and we express how much we love it, how great it is, how it's my favorite beer. And now, a couple of years later, not the biggest fan, to be honest. Sorry, New Glarus.
Got another paycheck walking in here.
Got another paycheck. The man's got a lot of things going on. All right, person number 2, paid. That's always important. Like
It should be the last of it.
No, it's all good.
Not that many people, so they're all paid now.
We're in an operation here, so I understand. We're literally in the middle of a brew house.
An active brew house where the tank behind me is continuing to
ferment,
gurgle and ferment and make happy noises.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about IPAs, but in Spotted Cow, I think it was.
Oh yeah, how once you go back to Cow, you just are kind of like, it's not bad. If it was all that was on draft besides light beer, I'd have it no problem. But
I'm when it comes to IPAs, I love them. I love the hazies. I recently had my first brewed IPA not that long ago, and I like that. So
the brewed is a style that it seems like it's not going to last, but I kind of dig them because it's a nerdy thing to make. It requires a bit of an understanding of the chemistry behind mashing and how to manipulate it to get this beer that is just super dry like champagne, but still fruity and effervescent almost. But unfortunately, in the realm of fast-moving IPA, it seems like it's not going to stick around, unfortunately.
What's the most popular one to make? So,
Oh, hazy's king right now.
Yeah.
You put the word hazy, juicy, or milkshake on a label and you will sell it. It doesn't matter if it's good or not, because I've had quite a few hazes that are pretty bad.
I had one a couple months ago from a brewery that you you would think it would be good, and it was disgusting. I still have a couple in my fridge, and I just can't drink them. Those are for the guests when they come over.
Hazies are harder to make than it would seem, and that's it trips up a lot of breweries who don't really understand what they're trying to accomplish. And then there's the ever fun ones now, where it's the milkshake ones, where they just slam all this fruit puree into the beer
Lactose.
just ahead of canning it.
Yeah.
And then they put on the can a big old sticker that says "Store cold or will explode." And then they do explode.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's not so much of a problem in Wisconsin, but you go out west, and people have plenty of stories of, I bought this like $20 4-pack of cans, and 3 of them exploded a week later.
Jeez.
You can't have sugar inside of a live beer product.
Yeah, that's a little insane. I've had some really good, like kind of like pineapple milkshake IPAs, which I'm a big pineapple guy. So the more pineapple you have, I don't know if it would taste worse, but I'd be for it.
And pineapple's a tough flavor to get into beer. A lot of fruits actually are, because when you eat fruit, most of the flavor coming at you is sugar.
Right.
And the yeast eat that, so they leave behind all the other stuff, which doesn't necessarily taste like the fruit that it was.
How long does with like, an IPA, you're kind of, you're using a little more kind of like citrus and things like that. How much do you have to like combat that? Do you have is there a formula to that?
Well, most of the IPAs that are out there don't actually have fruit in them.
Really?
Most of that citrus or that piney or the tropical flavors are coming from the hop variety.
Citra hops, yeah.
Yeah, so you got Citra, Mosaic, Simcoe, Eldorado, Idaho 7, Nelson Sauvin, Reiku, Wakatu. That's just a few of the varietals that are out these days. You've got good old Cascade. I mean, there's these oils in the hops that are reminiscent of these other flavors, and that's what comes out in the final product. And then how you handle them can affect that as well. So actually the Calamity that you've been drinking, that one has Simcoe as the major hop, and Simcoe is known to have some lemon character, some piney character, a little bit of tropical.
Yeah, I definitely got the pine out of it.
But the way we handled it was we used an English strain of yeast, and we added hops in during fermentation. And one of the oils inside of that hop is an oil called geraniol. And as the word implies, it smells like flowers. Floral is another big descriptor of old world, like European hops. But the yeast will actually eat that geraniol oil, and they'll spit back out citronol oil, which smells like orange or pineapple and fruit. And it transforms this not as fruity hop into a fruit bomb hop. And that's the guys that are making good New England IPAs. They're taking full advantage of this biotransformation process, and they're even adding in some varietals that don't have the big sexy names like Mosaic and Citra, and they're getting these like fruity tropical flavors by getting that conversion.
It's like sitting in a science lecture. I'm learning a lot.
There is a lot of nerdy science, and if people let me, I will sit there forever and talk about it. I got bored one day and was researching hazies and wound down a rabbit hole from a Japanese study involving coriander in a beer, and the conversion of this oil to this oil to that to this, and what did it do and how did it work. And about an hour later, I went, I better brew a beer with coriander one day.
That's awesome, man. I like I said, I really want to get back into the home brewing. I'm in an environment now where I can. Before I was renting. I now own a house, so I have an area, in the basement or something where you can kind of do that. And I don't know anything about the science of it, so
you don't have to. It's like I've met plenty of brewers that make great beer at home. They don't understand the science. They don't need to. They understand how to clean and sanitize, and that's like 90% of the game right there.
Right. So have you ever like tried to like combine two? You take one, take another, and make a new one?
Blending. Come find me at a brew fest towards the end, especially one where I've been partaking heavily, and I will recommend a blend of the blue and the red.
Yeah.
Because it's blueberry and raspberry mixed 50-50. It's great. But beyond that, I don't tend to blend beers too much. There are some people that are really into that, which all the power to them. But usually when I go to design a beer, I have a flavor in mind or a concept in mind. And that's what I'm looking to achieve in that product. The one glaring exception to that is barrel aging. The dirty secret about brewing is that we barrel age beers because I'm legally not allowed to just dump a bottle of whiskey into a beer or a bottle of wine into a beer.
Yeah, that's understandable.
It's highly illegal, but would be so much easier. So when I put a stout into a bourbon barrel, it's because I want that blend of bourbon character into my stout, and I can't just do it the easy way. Or if we've got some of the Pontificate in a red wine barrel.
Wow.
I'm hoping to get some of that like jammy, fruity character out of that barrel into it. So many easier ways I can do it at home, but here I'm constrained.
What's when you kind of are trying to make something new, concoct a new thing, like you said, you have this one in a wine barrel, you have this one in a bourbon barrel. Do you get like overly excited like when you can finally tap into that bad boy and be like, here it is?
When I first started barrel aging, I had it's been a week, better go check on it. I've since learned patience and hands off. Actually, making wine at home was the big kind of instructor on that, of let it do its own thing. It'll be there when you get back to it. Like the first couple of batches of mead I made, I'd get them bottled and they'd be real rough, real young, needing about a year of age on them to be drinkable. And I would, of course, sample the bottle every once in a while. And, oh, good, it's tasting great. How much do I got one bottle left. I've been quality checking too often. So
let it do its work.
Yeah, even
let the science happen.
Even when we have a beer we're excited about, which Calamity with that biotransformation, we had a bunch of other things we were trying kind of for the first time. There was excitement, but it was subdued and held in check because I've been down this road before, and sometimes you just gotta wait and let it do its thing.
It's like Christmas.
Yeah,
you gotta wait. It
will be good in the long run. Just let it happen.
Yeah, that's awesome. So did you have to I kind of get to the point where you're at? Did you take classes? Or is it just kind of your own research, your own trial and error? How do you get to this point?
So there is an educational pathway to get to brewing. There is the Siebel Institute in Chicago that, from what I understand, does a great job of educating. They've got anywhere from a few-week program to a couple-year program. Never done any of that myself. UC Davis in California is the other kind of big name in the U.S. for brewing education. For me, it was doing it at home in my spare time when I could scrounge up the cash, realizing I enjoyed it. I have a bit of a perfectionist streak.
Sure.
So once I start doing something, I want to learn how do I do it better? What can I do to improve this? Where is my growth capacity? And I eventually hit a point where what I would need to do to get better, or so I thought, was get access to toys I couldn't afford. Once I had access to those toys, I learned, no, there was a lot more left to learn. I just didn't know what was around.
Yeah.
So I got into brewing professionally after a couple of years of home brewing by basically taking what was termed as an apprenticeship program, which is its own story of kind of one of the reminders that as much as beer is a great industry, it's also a shitty industry sometimes. But I kind of just put my lumps in there and got trained on how to run a commercial system.
It's awesome.
It's another kind of not so well kept secret anymore, because we try to put out big blaring sirens to anybody who wants to be a brewer, is what you do at home to make a beer does not really translate to how do you make a beer on the professional scale. It's the guy that's been working in a dairy factory for 5 years and never made a batch of beer in his life, has no idea how it's made, is more qualified to make a beer than the home brewer that's been doing it for 10 years.
Yeah.
He's going to understand the machinery right out the gate much better than that home brewer is.
Yeah, and also like the cleanliness of things. Like you really gotta make sure everything's disinfected, sanitized, because you're giving this out to people. You're selling this product to people, and if people are all of a sudden throwing up and dying or something like that.
We do sit in a nice spot where there has not been one confirmed case of food poisoning ever for beer.
That's awesome.
It's a low pH product, which is a protectant against bacterial contamination. Well, foodborne illness contamination. There's other bacteria that are super happy to live in there, and some of them ruin your batch of beer, and some of them make beer called lambic that is super expensive and wonderful. It's a whole weird area of brewing that the Belgians are super good at. There's other things that we deal with, though. We deal with steam boilers. We've got hot liquid under pressure inside of, confined tubing with pumps. We've got chemicals that are high-grade cleaners. I knew one guy that I think he was out of work for almost a month because he dumped 190-degree water down his rubber boot.
Oh, man.
You cannot pull your foot fast enough out of there to not end up on your ass for a while.
Right.
So to everyone who thinks that we sit around and drink beer all day, we do not, because that's how you get hurt.
And also, this is it is a job.
It's a job, and there are points where I'm paid to drink. Those do happen, but it's a manufacturing facility. We have the same safety requirements. We are inspected by
OSHA,
the Department of Agriculture, OSHA, the TTB, which are men in polos with guns.
Oh, great.
Yeah, they're super fun.
That's like the ripoff of Men in Black.
Yeah, they have a great sense of humor. An old boss of mine, he had a bottle of like 12-year-old Glenlivet in his desk, or in a drawer in his office, in his desk. And the TTB was doing their inspection, and that facility had 0 liquor license. We were licensed to produce and distribute fermented malt beverage. And they walk into his office, and they go through the desk, and they pull out the bottle of whiskey and go, "This goes, you're getting a fine."
Oh, my God.
So they are men in polos with guns with a wonderful sense of humor. But yeah, it's a serious industry at its backbone.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, and like just like any other job, you're going to have good days. You're going to have really, really shitty days where you're just like, why am I here?
Yeah, I've got a 14-hour filter day that was one of those of, do I really want to do this? I guess.
Did I make the right choice?
There's a beer waiting for me at the end of the day if the tap room's still open when I finally get done.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we got one more here, it looks like. What am I looking at?
So that is Fox in the Rye. It is a West Coast rye IPA. So this is that bitter, hoppy bomb. It's 8% ABV. It's got this nice dank character from the CTZ hops.
It does. Yeah, when you say IPA, if you gave this to me and didn't tell me what it was, I don't know that I would guess an IPA.
It's had some time to mellow a little bit, but it does have bitterness to it.
Oh,
but
it does.
It's got this almost curse word in our industry referred to as balance. So there's bitterness, but it's offsetting a sweetness from the alcohol. There's enough malt in there to balance it out, so the bitterness is just enough on the back end that it makes you want to go back for another sip, which gets to be a problem on beer number 3 at 8%.
Right. And sometimes, when it goes down smoothly and it, you just never know. It can creep on you.
Oh yeah,
that's for sure. That was delicious. So these were all good. So these are all ones that you make, all ones that Do you memorize the recipes? Do you know them, or do you have to look at them?
I will probably never forget the recipe for Blue Bobber. I actually remember the lot number for the hops used in Blue Bobber. And I had a coworker that used to work with us, and he moved to a brewery in Minnesota. And he sent me a text message like 3 weeks in. He goes, "Dude, we're using the same hops you guys are." And it's the same lot number, because he still had it memorized.
Sure.
And it's just this like string of like 16 letters and numbers.
That's funny.
But all the other recipes here, Metternich's, I vaguely remember what's in there, but it's a one-off batch for us, so I don't need to memorize it. Same thing with Big Ed's Red. We probably won't brew that next year. We'll brew it as a different version of Big Ed's, so don't need to memorize it.
Well, that's kind of cool then.
Yeah. The ones that are important are memorized. The ones that are one-offs, there's a sheet somewhere that I can go back to if I have to.
Right. How easy is it for you to grab a beer like from a different brewing company and try to copy it?
That is more challenging than you'd expect.
I'd imagine. I would imagine it'd be pretty hard to do.
So even if that brewery hands me their recipe, it's still not going to be their beer. Because we're working with a single-celled microorganism, there's these like minute changes that take place based off their environment, based off of their equipment.
Sure.
It's referred to as a house character. So I could give you the recipe for Blue Bobber, and I can get you pretty close at home, but it's still not going to be blue because you didn't brew it at Fox River.
Right.
It's the same thing. I had a homebrew batch that I was trying to clone a beer. I think it's called Five Lizards, and it's by Three Rabbits Cerveceria down in Chicago.
Cool.
They do all Latin American themed beers. Just wonderful, like fruity things. And it's this beer that had passion fruit, lime, coriander, and I had like an idea. I'm like, I think this is how they got there, and I brewed my own batch, and I really liked mine. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't theirs.
Yeah. What so outside of Fox River, like kind of what's your go-to? Is there a specific company or a specific kind? Don't say like Coors Light or anything.
I have hit the final evolution of craft beer nerd, and anytime I visit a brewery, I look for the lightest ABV and lightest color lager they've got on draft, because those are the hardest to make. So if that's good, I can trust that maybe something else will be good. And if that's
Sure.
bad, I can probably go home now.
Yeah.
Beyond that, though, there are definitely a couple of breweries that I really enjoy that are out there. Jolly Pumpkin out of Michigan. It's all
Jolly
sour
Pumpkin.
brewing.
Okay.
And I love sour beer. I cannot brew. Well, before I go too deep and too nerdy into sour beer, because we could be here for the next 3 days
Sure.
on sour beer, there's two camps of sour brewing. There is the new modern sours that you see at every brewery, and they are what is referred to as kettle sour.
Okay.
So you add lactobacillus bacteria. It's the same stuff that makes sauerkraut and things like that. It gives
All
us
right.
this twang. You put it in your kettle, you let it do its twang, then you murder it with heat. And you then save yourself from contaminating the rest of your brew house with this just aggressive microorganism. Then there's the other breweries that go, the heck with that. I want more complexity to my sourness. And so they
Sure.
make a normal beer, they put it into a tank, and then they add these different bacteria and wild yeast to the fermentation. And there's a bunch of ways to do that. But you end up with this just like complicated sourness that's got
Right.
lactic twang, it's got acetic twang, it's got these like fruity notes from wild yeast, it's got what's referred to as old horse, which sounds disgusting and in large amounts is terrible, but just a little bit of old horse is just wonderful. And like they're the ones that sit in a barrel for 4 years, and
Awesome.
it's the wine of the beer world, really.
I do enjoy sours. I probably haven't had that many. I've had like I think it was like Sour Viking or something like that from Fargo's Brewing.
And that's going to be your kettle sour.
Right.
They're very tart, but they're usually fruity. They're easy drinking, and they're great in the summer. But Jolly Pumpkin does that fermentation with multiple microbes. Unfortunately, once you do that, that's what you do, because you will never get them out of your system.
Okay.
So they ran into it, and they had this beer a couple of years ago called La Rosa. I think that was what it was. No, sorry. La Rosa is from Revolution. I cannot think of what the name of the one was for Jolly Pumpkin, but it was this pale pink because it had hibiscus and rose hips, and it had this nice twang and this depth to it. And like I had one bomber of it, and I could have sat there all night drinking just
Nice.
that. It was great.
I'll have to look for that, or see if I can find someone to hook me up. That sounds good. But we don't drink enough sours on the show, I don't think. I mean, we try to get what we can and try different ones every once in a while, and they tend to be, your lagers or your kind of pilsners and stuff like that. But we've done a few sours, and I need to expand my horizons. We haven't done too many. We do stouts. I got that Quick Trip one,
The Glazer Beam.
the Glazer Beam, which I'm not supposed to drink them before the show, but I drink one. So I know what it's like. So the next episode it has it featured, well, I'll know what I'm getting myself
Not
into.
to give it
but-
away, but I am a fan of the Glazer Beam. And
I liked
actually, there is a running joke at our brewery about the one that made that. That's Carbon 4 out of Madison.
Yeah.
At least two of their current brewers are former Fox River brewers. One of them, he's been gone for a while. He went to a bunch of other places. And then we had the guy that went out to Minnesota that I talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
When they knew he was exiting, he had been approached by them to say hey, would he mind coming to Madison? So we have the joke that they are trying to collect all the Fox River brewers
There you go.
and build themselves a second Fox River facility. But
I do love Carbon 4.
I do dig some Fantasy Factory.
Fantasy
If
Factory's
for
the best.
nothing else, then that marketing is just on point. And
The artwork is great.
you pair
environment's
up with
great.
Quick Trip, you've won the Midwest.
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't know. For the people that aren't from the Midwest that are listening, Quick Trip is convenience store. It's like, Casey's is second place, I guess. But
It's a gas station, but with happy employees, good food, and clean bathrooms.
yeah, it has everything you need. You can go get some milk at Quick Trip while you
And it's
get
cheaper than
gas.
the grocery store, and it's good.
You can get bananas.
They are slowly
eggs.
taking over the world, and everyone's okay with it.
Absolutely. Yeah. They're definitely a monopoly when it comes to the areas that we're in.
And actually, we were making a joke here of, well, you know what? If they're going to do Glazer Beam with Carbon or with Quick Trip, we're going to go ahead and do, you guys have already won, but we'll do it with Casey's.
There you go.
So that, we've had a couple Casey's popping up here in Oshkosh, and
Right.
we all are like, oh, those will be nice for a year before Quick Trip puts them under.
Yeah, I full-heartedly agree. I describe myself as a craft beer enthusiast and a Quick Trip enthusiast. So when I saw that this beer was coming out, I was like, I have to get it. You have to get it.
When it's 2 a.m. and you're walking home from the bar and there's a Quick Trip on the way back, some roller bites, they just hit the mark.
Yeah,
There's no way around
they
it.
got good stuff. They got good food. I had Quick Trip for lunch today, to be honest, and
I've had a few of those.
I know a few people that have done the trifecta of breakfast, lunch, and dinner at a Quick Trip, and I haven't gotten to that part yet. I can't say that I'm a Quick Trip warrior yet, I guess.
I don't know that I've made all three, but I've definitely done 2 of the 3.
Oh, absolutely, I've done 2.
Yeah, the first brewer I worked at was in La Crosse, and if you can find a non-Quick Trip gas station in La Crosse, good for you. I know one, and it's not good,
right?
But there weren't restaurants near the brewery, but there was a Quick Trip, so I had a lot of Quick Trip dinners or Quick Trip breakfast, and yeah.
I used to DJ weddings, so if I couldn't find a Taco Bell after a gig, definitely Quick Trip was the place to go. So now you're opening up a pretty fancy looking. It's dipped in wax. It looks like a barrel aged beer called the Black Fox, the 2019 year, I'm guessing.
Yeah, so this was it's a blend of 2 of our beers. You had asked about blending.
Oh, there it is.
I will also be upfront. I can't take credit for this beer. This is our previous brewmaster, Kevin Bowen, who is now in France doing baking.
Okay, well, we're going to give you the credit. We're going to say it was you.
But this is a blend of our Scottish ale, which is the Marble Eye. It's one of our...
I've done that an episode with the Marble Eye, yeah.
It's one of our standards, and actually I think it is probably our best beer that we sell in the marketplace.
Sure. But
it's not as light as Blue. But it is that mixed with a little bit of stout that was aged in a Wallershine rye barrel for a year.
Okay, so this has been brewing... This is the 2019 version of it, but it's been
in a barrel for a year. So this was bottled Tuesday of this week. So this is about as fresh a bottled as possible.
Awesome.
We get our wax sourced locally here in Oshkosh. So a normal bottling day with our normal bottler, which is a Maheen machine. So anybody who is a brewer or a true brewery industry beer geek will know that name, and they will love it, and they will hate it. There is no one or the other with Maheen. There's just you go both ways with it. But we can get a full batch of Blue, so that's 670 gallons done in about 5 hours.
Okay.
This was about 60 gallons of this beer put into the Bomber, so that bigger bottle.
Right.
It took us 4 hours to do that.
Wow.
So it is much slower, much less efficient. We hand dip each bottle into the wax.
Awesome.
Hand labeled with my wonderful handwriting. We put the labels on by hand. But this is something we do once a year for Black Friday. And this is the first year we've gone with the Black Fox name. That's what we're going to do in the future. So actually the Pontificate and the Red Wine Barrel is probably next year's contender. But this one is only about 6% going into the barrel, but it definitely is going to pick up some booze once it's in there. But the flavors I get out of it are, you get this, the nice caramely, a little bit of chocolate note from the Scotch ale and the stout, but then you get this vanilla note that comes from the bourbon barrel. It smells like whiskey.
Yeah, it does.
It's delightful.
And these are the kind of ones that, if you do buy it, if you do get a barrel aged beer, you can let sit. And it'll, you're never going to get the same. You're never going to get the same sip because. Right? Am I right in
so
that?
As it warms, there's that trend that used to be super popular, and you still see it, of the frosted glass or mug at the bar.
Wow.
And you get your Miller Lite in that, and it's the best thing you've ever had.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is that really cold temperature closes your taste buds, so you don't taste anything. You can just slam it. With good beer, good wine, good whiskey, as it warms, it opens up, as it refers to. And it's just that your taste buds can pull more flavor out of it. So these barrel beers, as they warm up, you pull more and more flavor out. There was a certain point where once it hits room temp, it gets a little harsh because you can taste the alcohol a little more. But this one, it's a sipping beer. As far as actual aging though, this is one that, because it's a little lower alcohol, I would actually, if you buy them, I'd recommend drinking it right away.
Okay.
So it's not your 15% stuff that you can age for another 6 years.
Yeah, this definitely, the first sip, it has the boozy alcohol kind of taste to it, but there's a lot of people out there that are big bourbon whiskey enthusiasts that I think would probably appreciate this.
I like to think of myself as a whiskey enjoyer. I definitely am not a connoisseur. I'm not an expert. but I enjoy a well-made whiskey, and this definitely has flavors of good whiskey because Wallershine does make a nice rye.
Yeah. So, are you when you drink this kind of stuff? Do you? I guess if there's a bottle of bourbon in front of you or a bourbon-aged beer, what are you leaning to?
I'm going to go to the beer first and then to the bourbon. The idea behind that is the beer is going to be heavier, and I can finish with the bourbon, and it's going to be light. And
okay. I don't know that I could drink bourbon by myself. I'm also when it comes to spice, I'm the same way with spice as I am with harder liquor. A big baby. So like the taste of this is good, and it's a little more higher alcoholic. What did you say the ABVs of this?
It was about 6 or 7% going into the barrel, and there is an assumption of pulling alcohol out of the barrel, especially with this was a fresh barrel that we got from the distillery, so there was still some happy whiskey hanging around in there that we definitely sampled.
Yeah.
It's the best part of new barrel day. So you turn it up and you hope, and then sometimes you get out the coffee filters to filter out all the charcoal. But so this one pulled some alcohol out of it, but it's still not going to be any higher than 8 or 9, which is fairly light for a barrel aged beer.
And you can't. You can only brew one batch in the barrel, correct? Or do you reuse them?
So currently we have 3 barrels that actively have beer in them. We've got the Pontificate in a red wine barrel from the Hess Winery, which never heard of before this, but we had the barrel, so
there they are.
Throw their name out there. Yeah. That barrel has never seen beer in it. It's only had wine. But the beer that this Black Fox was in, when we pulled it out, we did refill those barrels with barley wine.
Okay.
I'm not expecting to get like this huge whiskey kick out of it. I'm hoping to get a hint of whiskey, maybe a little vanilla, maybe a little oak. That's about it. The rest of it's just going to be some light concentration of the beer itself, because you get what's referred to as the angel's share. So it's whatever's in the barrel, some of it evaporates out of the barrel through the wood or is captured into the wood itself. So you get less out of the barrel than you put in, but you get a thicker thing than you put in.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm aiming for on that. And then some of those multicultural sour barrels, they're brewed in oak under the same concept as wine, where you're not really looking to get flavor out of the oak so much, because winemakers, they value barrels that have been used 3 or 4 times usually, so they get a little bit of oak, but really they're getting that micro oxidization, so a little bit of air seeping in, and then that concentration as wine escapes out. So with those sour beers, you're letting your multiculture do its souring and its changes, and you're getting that same sort of micro oxidation and concentration. So if we were able to do sour beer here, we would, this barrel that's got the barley wine in it, that'd be its next stop.
Awesome.
But because we don't do those, because I don't want to ruin my whole brewery with them, second batch out, that's the end of the barrel. I actually have like 10 barrels right now that I'm looking to offload in the near future, because they've had 2 beers in them.
Yeah.
That's the extent of what I can do with it. I'm going to look to try to sell them. Some homebrew clubs might want them for sour brewing. I'm hoping some people want them for planters, maybe.
Yeah. I want some. I was actually thinking about getting one for my gazebo. So if you want to...
I could look at that. One thing to know for anybody out there that's looking to buy a barrel for furniture, barrels are not designed to hold their shape when they're dry. You need to do something to it. Lacquer it, fill it with sand. I don't care what you do, but if you just leave it dry, it's going to start to... The wood's going to it's going to lose size. It's going to shrink down, and then the whole barrel is going to start to fall apart. It's an issue we run into when we get used barrels that haven't had anything in them for a while, is we have to rehydrate the barrel. So like that wine barrel hasn't seen wine for a couple of years. I had to fill it with 190 degree water to swell that wood back out, or it wouldn't even hold liquid. It's better to do that with water than put a whole bunch of beer in it and then watch it drip to the floor and be sad.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I had no idea. Because you see all these places that sell them, but they don't. I don't know that they advertise
how they've treated them. Yeah,
and also sometimes you pay a pretty penny for these things.
There was so one of my friends, Amanda, actually sent me a link last week for some furniture for a man cave, and it was these whiskey barrel chairs, a table, whole set.
Yeah,
it was only $1,000. I mean, that's nothing.
Right.
That's a lot for furniture for me.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would agree too. Yeah, and it's not cheap. And if they don't, you buy these things, you're gonna put them on for decorations, or you use it kind of like an end table, and if you have a bar setting or something like that. It's good to know. So I'm glad you said that because I would have never known.
Well, it's also a fun, dirty secret of the distilling industry in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
To be classified as Kentucky bourbon, the whiskey going into it must not go into a used barrel. It has to be 100% new American oak.
Yeah.
So up until the craft beer revolution where we started caring about those barrels, those guys just, every batch of whiskey just churned out 30, 40 barrels that they had to get rid of as a waste product.
Yeah.
They had zero value 10 years ago. And now they are worth hundreds of dollars. It's almost ridiculous how that worked out for them.
That's crazy, man. Well, we're getting towards the end of the episode. I really appreciate you allowing me to come here, allowing me to come to your workplace, take time of your day to talk this because it's been super educational and it's been great. At the end of every episode, we do a thing called Drink It or Dump It. Usually we only have one beer, to give our opinions on, to say if we're going to drink it, meaning we'll drink it again, or we're going to finish what's in our glass, or we're going to dump it down the sink, or, in your neighbor's face, wherever you want.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a hard choice, I guess, here. And just out of curiosity, pick one to drink that I tried and pick one to dump. And dump it just means,
So the dump it, I hate to say this because somewhere one of my bosses is going to hear this and I'm going to get talking to. So the little backstory before I say it. In the brewing industry, the beer that is the most popular and the number one seller, the brand name beer, you will never see the brewers drinking it.
Sure.
They are sick and tired of it. They want nothing to do with it. I don't
Fair
care
enough.
what brewery you work at. I guarantee you go to New Glarus, the new guy is the only one drinking Spotted Cow.
Sure.
So Blue Bobber, I love you. You make my paycheck. But I only drink you like once a year, so I'm going to go ahead and say dump that one.
But you could say it's special then when you have it once a year.
It's coming back to an old friend.
Right.
Yeah. But that would be, I don't drink it because I see it every day. I brew so much of it in the summer. Yeah. I'm good with it. But Fox and the Rye for me is one that it kind of hits a special mark for me.
Okay.
So that was the first proper IPA I brewed here on the big system. We did a whole new process with that where we dropped, it's a process called whirlpooling. Mm-hmm. You get the boil kettle spinning in a whirlpool, and you do that to basically help clarify the beer.
Yeah.
And we dropped the temp in there down from boiling to 170 and just hit it with this massive charge of hops. And the thought process is at the lower temp, I extract these wonderful flavor oils, but I don't get bitterness. It was the first time we've ever done that on our system. No idea if it was going to work.
Cool.
Our IPA game up until that point had been not so modern, I guess is the word I would use. A lot of ours were too bitter. They weren't hoppy enough. That one came out the other side, and it hit every mark I was aiming for. The bitterness was right on point with the alcohol, and it had this just wonderful aroma. And I've drank way too much of it, so that's going to be the one I'm going to keep drinking till it's gone in like 2 or 3 weeks.
Well, that's awesome, man. And I would say, I enjoyed them all. I really did. Oddly enough, I'm usually not a big bourbon barrel guy. I liked it. I liked the Black Fox. I thought it was good. And you said you're selling that on Black Friday.
Yeah, so that releases at both facilities in Oshkosh and Appleton on Black Friday.
Okay.
The price per bottle is $20.19.
Fair enough.
We strained ourselves hard on that one. It's also going to be available on draft for,
cool.
You can try it before you buy it sort of scenario.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And I appreciate you doing this. Appreciate you let me kind of see the world because, like we said before, some people might glamorize the brewing life, and it's very different to the reality for their perception. It's different.
Yeah, it's not all getting paid to drink, although I can't deny sometimes I'm paid to drink.
Awesome, man. Well, I hope you keep doing this. I hope you continue to love the brewing process, and I believe I'm going to see you in February for the Fond du Lac Brew Fest.
Yes, I will reprise my role as they put it as Homebrew Drew.
Homebrew
to
Drew.
Do a class. I forget what my class is this year. Might be sour beer, actually.
All right.
I have to look at my notes one of these days. But I will also be there repping Fox River, so we'll have some of our beer there. It's the hometown festival. I gotta be a part of it.
Yeah, I'll be there.
It's good to have people come in to the brewery and see how things are done. The more we can,
the food's great.
The food is good. I should probably rep that and earn my paycheck. But anytime we can bring people in and get them to learn a little more about our products, because at the end of the day, when you're looking at a beer at a grocery store and you look at the price tag that's on our beer versus Miller, AB InBev, all of those, there's got to be a reason why our beer costs more. And, we'll argue that it tastes better, but a big part of it is we view ourselves as craftsmen. We're trying to make I hate to say the word artisanal product, but by bringing people in and educating them, it kind of gets you guys more of an idea of why we care so much about this, because at the end of the day, we're not curing cancer, it's beer. So I guess it's always great to get people in. Yeah,
absolutely, man. I appreciate you doing this. And well, anytime you want to hop back on the program, I'm 100% always.
So you are always welcome back whenever you need a beer.
Yeah, I'll definitely be back. So thanks, man.
Pew, pew, audio. Goodbye, everyone.